views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Adrienne Austin. I'm your Deputy Chancellor for the Division of Community Empowerment, Partnerships, and Communications, and I will be your moderator for this virtual community meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight for this information session about New York City's plan to return to school. It is important that all of our families are able to participate, and we are very grateful to the Spanish and Mandarin interpreters who are here with us tonight on a separate line. Thank you, Yailin Montiel and Nicholas Radulescu, who are our Spanish interpreters. Thank you to Zhao Chun Yang and Shi Feng, who are our Mandarin interpreters. And thank you to the Office of Sign Language Interpreting Services for providing American Sign Language at this meeting. We will now announce instructions in Spanish and Mandarin for attendees who may wish to dial into these interpretation lines at this time. Yailin, can you please provide the instructions in Spanish?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. The following message is going to be in Spanish, offering interpretation services. Buenas noches a todos, gracias por estar acá. Si desea servicios de interpretación en español, por favor, marque desde su teléfono al 888-475-4499 e ingrese el número de conferencia 735-255-0102. Le repito, marque desde su teléfono al 888-475-4499 e ingrese el número de conferencia 735-255-0102. Si desea escuchar audio en español, pero desea permanecer en esta sala de conferencia virtual de Zoom para que pueda ver la reunión en su computadora, por favor, silencie todos sus dispositivos y disminuya el volumen en su computadora y marque desde su teléfono a la línea de conferencia en español. Nuevamente, la línea de conferencia en español es 888-475-4499 e ingrese el número de conferencia 735-255-0102. Gracias.
Thank you, Yailin. Zhao Chun, can you please provide the instructions in Mandarin, please?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. The following instruction is in Mandarin. 需要普通话翻译的家长，请拨打电话888-475-4499，密码933-059-6663。我再重复一遍，需要普通话翻译的家长，请拨打电话888-475-4499。密码933-059-6663，请大家在会议期间将电脑和手机保持静音。再讲一遍，电话是888-475-4499，密码是933-059-6663。谢谢。Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Adrienne Austin, and I am your moderator for this evening. I'm really excited about tonight's citywide parent and student information session. We're going to be hosting our next session on August 27th. The registration link is available on our DOE website at www.schools.nyc.gov. We will also be hosting an event jointly with the Department of Health during the week of August 31st. So I encourage you to continue to check our website to learn more. Many of you have attended the parent meetings hosted by our superintendents and our principals. Those are really great sources of information on how our individual schools are planning, so we encourage you to continue to attend those local meetings. We know the return to school will look very different than in previous years, and our goal is to provide our families and our communities with as much information as quickly as we can so that parents know what to expect in the fall. I will now provide details on how tonight's community meeting will work. All participants will be able to listen to this meeting via computer audio or via phone. We've received over 3,000 questions in advance of this meeting, and we've identified commonly raised issues which we will try to address tonight. If your question does not get answered tonight, or if you have additional questions, here are some resources for you. One, our DOE website has the most up-to-date return to school information at www.schools.nyc.gov. Second, Your school principal will be in touch with you with school-specific plans, and you should always feel free to reach out to your parent coordinator. And third, as I mentioned previously, we're going to hold an information session on August 27th, and we will have additional information sessions as we move towards the school year. So thank you all for being here. I now have the honor and the privilege of introducing our New York City's school chancellor, Richard Carranza.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and I want to welcome everyone that's here on this call this evening. Thank you for taking time to be here, and I'm excited to answer as many questions as I can in company with my colleagues, our superintendents, executive superintendents, and all of my colleagues that are working day and night to have a successful school opening. Our vision for the fall is safe, strong, and supportive learning and an excellent education for all of our students, each and every one of them. School will be in session 5 days per week, no matter where our scholars are, whether they're in person or they are at home or in another location. I know that everyone has questions, and I want to share with everyone where we are with the planning and how we plan to achieve this vision. I understand why there are so many questions. As a parent myself, I'd have the same questions. All of us raising children want them to be safe and healthy and happy. And we want our children to always be learning and growing and getting ready to take on the world. And our schools play such an important role in the well-being of our children, especially now when they've been through so much. For us, health and safety lead the way as always. So I'd like to share a few thoughts with you and a little bit of information on some of these topics. In terms of health policy, we are focused on preparing for a safe return, and I want to appeal to all of you, all of our families. It's going to be more critical than ever that we work very closely together to prepare students what the first day, the first week, and the first couple of weeks are going to look like in school. And what you can do specifically is to start now talking to your children, especially your younger children, about why it's so important to wear a mask, why it's not only a service to themselves, but to others to wear a mask. It's truly an act of friendship. It's an act of love. For our older students, please start inculcating them the fact that this is not going to look the same as it was before. Lunch isn't going to look the same. There's going to be one-way hallways where you walk in one way and you must social distance as you're entering, coming into the school, and you exit another way. All of those things are things that you can do at home to start preparing our students for what this very different school year will look like when we start in the fall. This is a very important partnership, and this is especially true in helping our youngsters, our young students, and our older students understand that this fall will not look like any return to school they've ever experienced before. And now a little bit more about what we're doing to keep our children and our staff safe and protected from the virus as they can be. Asking our teachers to take a test in the days before reopening, we are also prioritizing the results at 34 city-run sites across the city. All schools are taking common sense precautions, from face coverings to social distancing and the frequent cleaning of our school buildings. As we speak, all of these disinfectants, the hand sanitizers, the PPE, the face coverings are being delivered to our school sites. Returning to buildings, once we return to the buildings, if a student or a staff member is feeling sick, please help us stay home. Get a test. Positive cases confirmed by the test will trigger an investigation by the Department of Health and test and trace. And during the investigation, a classroom or a school may be closed. Results of the investigation will quickly be communicated to the school communities. And specifically, if there's one case, the school will remain open, but the class and those in close contact with the positive case will quarantine for 14 days. That's one case. If there are 2 or more cases in the same classroom, that classroom and close contacts will quarantine, but if those cases are in different classrooms, then the entire school will close and pivot to remote learning for at least 24 hours. Those classrooms will quarantine, and depending on the investigation, additional classrooms or the entire school, as I've mentioned, will close for 14 days. For unconfirmed cases, people with symptoms but do not have a test should stay home for 10 days until they feel better. Testing will be made widely available to all. For everyone in contact with a confirmed positive case, Students and staff in close contact to a positive case, they need a quarantine, and they will stay home and continue education remotely. Students and staff can come back to school after quarantine with a negative test result or with a doctor evaluation and no symptoms. Emphasis on health, safety, and quick, transparent communication will be the focus of all of our health and safety measures. Now, we've also asked families to let us know by the end of last week whether they wanted their children to begin the school year in fully remote learning mode. We've looked at the data, and as of now, 26% of the families in our school system plan to begin the year fully remote learning. This is consistent with what families told us earlier in the year about their preferences. Right now, we're planning for nearly 3/4 of our students, that's over 700,000 students, to begin the school year in a blended learning modality. This means that they'll learn in person in school buildings part of the school week and continue learning remotely from home the rest of the week. We also asked teachers who needed an accommodation to work from home to make that request. And as of now, we can expect about 85% of the teaching workforce to be teaching in person in a blended learning model. So whether working from home or in person, we know that our teachers will be as engaged and devoted as ever. We know that they have grit and compassion and a dedication to your children. And we've seen that demonstrated in the last 6 months when we've been in remote learning mode. And this inspires me every day. But I know that they will continue to bring that same passion and creativity and kindness to the classroom, wherever it is, every day, and whether the instruction is in person or online. This week, we've also taken the results from the online survey that parents completed last week and provided those results to principals so that they can use the data for their school to identify the best plan for their school's reopening. Each one of our principals is absolutely blazing an entirely new path for their schools and leading our teams of fellow dedicated professionals hustling all summer long to be ready for the first day of school. The same can be said of all school-based staff that is working to make sure that our school buildings and communities are safe and supportive environments set up for rich and engaging learning. Our central, borough, and citywide office employees are also critical to reopening. They're working every day to reinvent and deliver the policies that support our school communities, churn out more curriculum and curricular guidance. And speaking of curricular guidance, we know a lot more now about how that's going to work for safe in-person learning as well as remote learning. And I want to share with you our most recent guidance on what to expect in the fall. We can't have all of the students from a particular school arrive at the same time in the morning, and we can't have all of the students leave the school building at the same time. We have to make sure that we have social distancing at all time, and we have to have control over the flow of people entering and exiting the school buildings. So students will be provided with different arrival and departure times by grade or perhaps by class, so that we can better control the flow of students and ensure proper social distancing at all times. One of our commitments to our families has been to ensure that all students, whether in person or remote, will experience live instruction. And so we are working to make sure that we are constructing the remote learning day in a way that best serves all of our learners and includes live instruction from the remote teacher. Prior to the start of the school day, teachers will have a 30-minute period to plan together. And this collaborative planning time will ensure that the in-person teacher and the remote teacher have time to plan together and share information so that students who are in person and remote are experiencing the same pace and academic content. Another important feature of the school days this school year will be the one-on-one student support. Teachers will have 20 minutes of dedicated time every day for students to ask follow-up questions or receive additional help. And finally, physical education in the arts, athletics, dance, moving images, music, theater, and visual art are the core content and play an important role in nurturing students' social-emotional well-being. They will be taught as part of a blended and remote learning model in the fall. We've provided detailed guidance for schools on how to operate these programs, and they will be part of students' academic experiences. So I am glad tonight to be joined by Superintendents Alvarez, Galacio, Pate, Prayer, and Scott, and our Executive Director, Anzalone, and Principals Fong and Hamilton. They are our local leaders and have been working hard to make sure that our schools from across the city are preparing for the fall. So I'm glad that they are here to share their planning with us tonight and answer questions from our parents. I'm also very proud to be joined this evening by our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Linda Chen, our Deputy Chancellor, Karen Goldmark, Sean Fitzpatrick, our Senior Executive Director of Office of Pupil Transportation, Saeed Azim from our Division of Instructional and Informational Technology, and from School Facilities Chief Executive Officer John Shea, and Senior Executive Director Tom Tarotko. So thank you to all of my colleagues for being with us here this night. But most of all, I want to thank all of the students, parents, families, and staff who have joined us tonight. Together, we make New York stronger, and together, we will have a successful school year. So, Adrian, I'm tossing it back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. Before we go into the question and answers, I'm really excited. We have a great video, it's very short, that we want to show you just for all those families out there who are wondering what we're talking about when we're saying electrostatic cleaner, PPE. This is going to give a visual for that. So if you guys can cue up the video.
It's almost time for school. Here's what we're doing to protect our school communities from COVID-19. Supplies. Our schools will have all the PPE and cleaning supplies they need, including 4.4 million face masks and 1.5 million cloth face coverings, 3.5 million bottles of hand sanitizer, 80,000 canisters of disinfectant wipes. Cleaning. 6,600 maintenance staff will disinfect all school buildings after school and clean high-touch zones multiple times daily. Electrostatic disinfecting. 3,750 electrostatic sprayers will efficiently disinfect surfaces with zero physical contact. HVAC equipment. We have surveyed all buildings to ensure maximum ventilation. Rooms without adequate ventilation will not be used for teaching. Safety signage. 210,000 signs will be put up throughout schools to make sure that students keep physical distance and practice good hygiene. To learn more about how we're putting safety first this school year, visit schools.nyc.gov/return to school 2020.
Okay, so now we're going to dive into our questions. Our first question, Chancellor, is for you. It's from a parent from Bronx Latin who asked the question anonymously, and the parent wanted to know, if the schools reopen and then the citywide infection rate increases above 3%, will all schools be closed again?
Absolutely, yes. So the World Health Organization, the CDC, and even the state of New York has set a threshold for 5% positivity rates as the line where things start closing down again. Mayor de Blasio and I have been very clear that our percentage is 3%. It's even more rigorous than those three entities have put forward. And that's because we're very serious about keeping our families, our students, and our community safe. So if the positivity rate increases to 3%, not beyond, even if it increases to 3%, we will shut in-person learning down and pivot to all remote learning immediately. In addition, I think it's also important to understand that I also am very troubled with what I see on TV and in the news reports where there are schools in other states of the country that have opened already, and you've seen those pictures of lots of crowded hallways, and you've heard about the students and staff getting infected, and you've heard about them having to close their schools. In every one of those cases, number one, they're not following the social distancing requirements like we just showed what we're going to be doing and we've talked about. They're not enforcing the social distancing. They're not enforcing the mask wearing. They're not enforcing the disinfecting. And I think one of the most critical components is Dr. Fauci has talked a lot about this, that it is safe to consider in-person learning, but one of the most important critical factors is that you must have a low rate of positive community spread to even consider in-person learning. New York City has been hovering between 1% and 2% for the last 2 months. So that's testament to the great work that all of you and us have done as New Yorkers, not politicizing the wearing of masks, washing our hands, social distancing, staying in when we were told we needed to stay in. We've been able to drive that percentage down, and that's remarkable. And I will tell you, as I meet with my colleagues, the leaders of the 10 largest school systems in America on a weekly basis, of the 10 largest school systems in America, there is only one that has a positivity rate of 1%, and that is us in New York City, which is why we're the only ones that are even in the position to consider in-person learning because of that low positivity rate. So, very long-winded way of answering your very simple, direct question, but I will tell you, we will not hesitate to shut in-person learning and pivot to 100% remote learning if we reach 3%.
Thank you, Chancellor. We have a number of questions about how DOE is preparing school buildings for a school reopening. Victoria Procia at IS-24 in District 31 wants to know, will school custodians get training on the new cleaning protocols, and when will they get the new equipment to clean the schools?
Yes, so the custodians are actually undergoing consistent and constant training. The supplies, and let me just be honest, we've been warehousing the supplies that have been coming in. If you saw how many millions of face masks and the disinfectant and the hand sanitizer. But you know, we have to live in the real world, and the only reason that we haven't delivered them to schools sooner is that those things are a really hot commodity. And what we didn't want to do is risk, with schools being closed, that somebody breaking in and taking all of those things. So they're being delivered as we speak. Today I had the opportunity to visit the Village Academy in Far Rockaways in the Queens, and their incredible principal, Dr. Doris Lee, who took us through the building, took the mayor and I through the building. We got to see this in action. In fact, I got to see the custodian with the electrostatic cleaner actually do a cleaning of a room. And he explained the technology in a depth that you can tell he absolutely has been trained, and talked about how it's different from just wiping down, and when you spray it, it actually envelops the entire desk, and within 10 minutes it dries, has killed any microbes that are on that desk, but has also become a barrier. It becomes a barrier to other things falling on that desk. And he was able to do an entire classroom, desks, walls, you name it. He was able to do it in under 2 minutes. So this is fast, it's efficient, and those are the kinds of technology that we're employing to be able to keep our buildings safe and clean. We were also able to go and see the ventilation system and see what has been upgraded and the upgraded filters that have been put into the ventilation system, and be with them when they did their walkthrough to actually point out what ventilation was in every room and how they were going. I was very impressed, because planning is obviously being strategic and thinking about and making plans for how you're going to implement, but actually seeing the implementation firsthand was very impressive. And remember, we're still 1 month out before the start of school, and to see that level of detail already in the field was really, really reassuring to me as well.
Thank you very much for that answer, Chancellor. We have a similar question from Jason Guadardo from PS24 in District 10, and he wants to know, how will cleaning measures be monitored in schools? And what's the projected action plan in terms of the frequency of cleaning and disinfecting classrooms and school buildings?
Yeah, really good question. So I'm going to phone a friend, and I'm going to ask John Shea, because I know he's on, if John could answer that question, because this is the world that John has been living in for the last 6 months as we've been planning on return to school. John?
Sure. Thank you, Chancellor. And you did a great job explaining what we're doing. And I'll just add with this question. It's a great question. I want to say that we're going to continue the training and the efforts that we're making and the guidance to custodians. That's not going to stop when school starts. I just want to be clear about that too. We're going to continue to train, and as we learn, as things happen when school gets back for regular instruction, we're going to adapt and provide the supports that custodians need. There's a wide variety of ways that we track what custodians are doing in the building. We have cleaning and disinfecting logs that we are going to be giving to custodians to make sure that they fill those out. We also have a management structure where we have deputy directors of facilities, which are managers that manage a group of buildings, and they are responsible for getting the custodian the information that they need in their building and to check up and make sure that work is actually happening in the field. We also have a group called School Stat, which is a group of inspectors that goes out twice a year and on a constant basis is looking at the schools and rating them. One of the things that they rate the buildings on is the cleanliness. And lastly, the principals. The principals are a very strong partner with us in making sure that what's going on in their schools is to their satisfaction. And we have constant communication with principals as well if they have concerns.
Thank you very much, Chancellor and John, for filling in those details. We have a question that's more health related, and it is from the same parent, Jason Guardado, and he wants to know about temperature checks and whether or not temperature checks are going to happen for all students, teachers, and persons entering the school building.
Yeah, so our current guidance is that will happen. We're also exploring, because we've heard from our parents that if they had a thermometer, they would ensure that they check their students' temperature before they come to school. We think that's a really good idea. So we're actually exploring right now what it would cost to buy a thermometer and have that available free of charge for every family, because we do know that there are families that are going to want to do that. But the question of temperature checks is absolutely important. So that will be happening. And then, in a matter of total transparency, I know we always want our parents to be partners and we want them to come to school. But I'm just going to say it's going to be unlike any other school year. We will be limiting who can enter our schools. So especially in the younger years where you walk your child to the classroom door, you do the handoff, you do the hug and the kiss, that's not going to happen this year. It's going to be the hug and the kiss at the doorway entering into the school, because it's going to be obviously very, very critical that we limit the number of individuals that are entering schools. And then once we've entered schools, that we control the movement within the schools so that we maintain the appropriate social distancing, while at the same time having the additional safety protocols in place with masks, PPE, etc. So yes, there will be limited entrance.
Thank you for that answer, Chancellor. We have some questions here on masking, and so I'm going to ask them individually. One of the questions is from a parent, Ruth Duran-Chea from PS 315 in the Bronx, and she wants to know, are face coverings or masks mandatory, and how will it be enforced for older students? And she sort of has a comment on this saying, I've been told that they are only recommended and that students won't have a consequence for choosing not to wear one.
Yeah, thanks for letting me clarify this. So number one, masks are going to be required for everyone. It's not an option. It's not if you feel like wearing it today. And let me be really clear. We're going to require students to wear the mask. It can't be a chin guard. It can't be a mouth guard. It can't be just a nose guard. It's going to have to cover your nose and your mouth. It has to be the mask worn appropriately. Now, how are we going to enforce this? We're going to do a lot of positive reinforcement. We're going to do a lot of reviewing the protocol. We're going to do a lot of pointing out and making sure that if somebody isn't following the protocol, that they're reminded to do the protocol. But let me also be very clear. We are in a global pandemic that in the United States has caused the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans. So we are going to positively reinforce, we're going to cajole, we're going to ask, we're going to pretty please remind. But at some point, if a student refuses to wear their mask, or a family says, we don't believe in wearing the mask, then they have just elected to have remote learning 100%. And they will forego the opportunity to be in a blended learning environment until they are willing to follow the safety protocols. Now, I know that may sound harsh, but I'm being very transparent here. We're not playing with this. This is a matter of life and death. It's a matter of health and safety. If you are in person in a school, you will wear a mask and you will wear it appropriately. If you can't, you don't want to, or you just refuse to, you will be in remote learning mode where you can do whatever you want to do in your home. It's just that simple.
Thank you, Chancellor. This is a follow-up question to that. It's from a parent from MS 104. It's an anonymous question, and it's a question about whether or not if a student can't tolerate wearing a mask, but is able to socially distance and do all of the other health and safety requirements, will this be acceptable?
So there's going to be a very limited array of exceptions. For example, we know that, I'll just give one example. Students with autism, depending on where they are on the spectrum, may have a very difficult time with wearing a mask. That's a legitimate reason. We're still going to endeavor to educate, to support, and have them wear the mask for whatever amount of time they can. But there will be case-by-case exceptions that are legitimate exceptions. So absolutely, we understand and we recognize that. And we're going to be continue to be working very closely with our health experts around what those exceptions are, how they should be implemented. And again, we want to do this with compassion, and we understand that there will be a need for exceptions. But by and large, the vast majority of cases will be required to use the mask, because we know that, let me give you an example. In a phone call we just had with the medical professionals, not only local, but national medical professionals, there's a lot of airtime that is being really overwhelmed with this issue of ventilation. What is appropriate ventilation? What kind of ventilation? What should the ventilation look like? But when you talk to the medical experts, they say ventilation is but one of many other factors that are critically important when in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And what they've said is ventilation is probably number 4 on the list. The number 1 thing is face coverings. That's number 1. Number 2 is the appropriate use of sanitizer and washing your hands. Number 3 is social distancing. And then number 4 is ventilation. So if you have just one of any of those 4 things, you're not really any better than if you had them all 4. So that's why we're gonna seek to have all 4 of those conditions at all times to give us the maximum possibility of safe in-person learning.
Thank you for that answer, Chancellor. We are really excited tonight. We have with us superintendents, principals, and we're going to bring them into this conversation. I want to welcome Michael Prayer. He's our high school superintendent for Brooklyn South. Superintendent Prayer, can you give us a brief overview of how you and the principals of South Brooklyn's high schools are preparing for a reopening of schools?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Adrian, Deputy Chancellor Adrian Austin, for having me. Super excited to be on the panel with my guests and colleagues. So just a little bit about Brooklyn South. My team and I are working shoulder to shoulder with principals to ensure all students return to school safely. We know that safety is top of mind for all parents. Schools are ensuring that at this time, that reopening launch, as well is, and the momentum maintained for that launch throughout the school year will be continuous and incorporate activities that will support and integrate social emotional learning activities, as well as trauma-informed pedagogy. But I think that's really important. That's what we're planning. And additionally, just allowing teachers the time to begin to figure out how they're gonna master the learning management systems and platforms. So a lot of the principals, APs, and teachers are all collectively coming together to really design really rigorous activities and learning engagement opportunities for our teachers. Additionally, principals are ensuring that students will have access to internet and devices. This is really important. Over the summer, a lot of things happen, but over the summer I know, and currently, even today, I know principals and their teams were on the phones reconnecting with families to ensure that their laptop devices are up and running with no issues. And this is most important for our incoming students, believe it or not. A lot of times we forget that we do have a lot of incoming students coming in, certainly into a lot of our large high schools. So that incoming 6th grade, our incoming 9th grade are important. And the focus there is just to make sure that they have 360 degrees of support. From my office, from the BCO, working in collaboration with the BCO, just to make sure that we don't lose sight of the incoming parents and families. I know there's a lot of fear and a lot of concerns, so we actually have creative mentoring partnerships with existing and incoming leaders happening right now. So I'm super excited about that. And with respect to instruction, which is really important, schools are engaged in evaluating curricular options for the continuity of learning with a focus on personalization of learning for all students, specifically students with disabilities and multilingual learners and students in temporary housing. This process involves a deep dive into the priority learning standards and a detailed significant analysis when we're looking at the right programming models and making the right exemption requests. So all these things are happening simultaneously So that's just a few of the things we're doing in Brooklyn South, but we're super excited about reopening for September.
Thank you very much for that answer. I know you're doing a lot with mentorship for the incoming students. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. We really try to figure out what parent leaders that are existing in our schools and match them with incoming ninth grade parents, just to make sure that they are connected, they are supported. So that's one of just one of the things that I know is happening across many of our schools in Brooklyn South. Just that parent piece. We're meeting with PCs weekly and monthly, just to make sure that their questions are being asked, even though they receive a lot of information from FACE in your office, but we just try to be that extra support for them. But just trying to give parents access to us frequently and make sure that they have access to others in their schools. So that parent mentoring piece, parent on parent engagement is very important.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you some questions that we got from parents just to hear how this is working locally in Brooklyn South. The question here is from Carmel. She is Carmel Offman. She's a parent from PS 36 in District 31. And she wanted to know, will students doing full remote learning be using the same materials as those students in blended instruction? For example, will everyone in the same grade still use the same textbooks or workbooks and be taught the same lessons? And also, will there be an amended school supply list, or is that dependent on each school or teacher?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Yeah, all students will be engaged in standards-based learning that is aligned to their grade level. Schools differentiate support for students based on need, and that can include intervention support, accelerated learning tasks, and modification of assignments to support students with individualized learning plans. In terms of supply lists, schools will and should supply, the school supply lists are often tailored, I should say, to meet the needs of the subject, grade level, and learning experiences. So schools will provide that information directly to families.
Thank you. And then one more question around this topic, and I think you answered this broadly earlier, but it's from a parent at PS 214 in District 19, and the parent wanted to know, will we continue to use Google Classroom? So I know you talked about learning management systems. If you could go into that and answer that question about Google.
Sure, great question again. We want to ensure system-wide consistency in the interest of every student's experience. So therefore, DOE will work with schools to adopt the use of learning management systems such as Google Classroom or iLearn NYC. However, it's important to know that schools are not limited to using G Suite or iLearn NYC for the incoming year. So those schools can use other tools. Schools are responsible, however, for instructional materials that are organized and available in a platform with clear processes for access by teachers, students, and families alike. So finally, our schools should also continue to use Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Zoom, video conferencing, and things that they know will certainly meet the needs of their objectives and goals in terms of servicing students and families.
Thank you, Superintendent Prayer. I have a question. I think this question is from one of our students. It's a student at Brooklyn Tech, Sai Ying, and she wants to know, and this is a trick question, do I have to go to school on the first day of school if I choose all remote learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. To echo the words of the Chancellor, who I heard them say this 100 times, and I certainly support it. Students will be learning 5 days a week. And the first day, of course, of learning has always been my favorite day. The first day, I would say, is a great day for connectivity and opportunity for teachers and students alike. So yeah, you should certainly look forward to that first day, because I know our teachers and leaders will be looking forward to meeting you.
Thank you, Superintendent Prayer. And in all fairness, I'm going to turn to our Chancellor. Chancellor, this question sort of begs a question of attendance policy and what that's going to look like as we enter blended learning.
Yeah, so when we pivoted to remote learning in March, it was obviously very quick based on the circumstances and the health issues that we all were facing at that time. So we had to modify midstream many of our policies. Our attendance policy, our grading policy, to name just a few. And we were very clear at that time that we were making modifications due to these unforeseen circumstances and to really not penalize students for changing the rules midway through the semester. So that is very different from where we are now. We are starting the semester, we are starting in the fall, so the attendance will count and the grades will count, which is why I've said we're going to have time at the beginning of every day for teachers to collaborate so that the remote learning teacher and the blended learning teacher are on the same page instructionally and providing the same pacing, providing the same focus, and we call it the continuity of instruction. So again, we also recognize this is a traumatic event. We recognize this is not a normal, whatever that means, school year that we've all experienced in the past. So we recognize that. There will be a good bit of compassion. But what we also are saying is that, okay, we're starting from square one. Everybody knows the rules. Everybody knows you have to attend. Attendance will be taken. We know people now have devices. We know people now understand what remote learning can look like, and grades will count. So just, again, be prepared. And this is a great place where parents can actually partner with us in making sure that our scholars understand that as well.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Superintendent Prayer. I think that's a pretty clear, resounding yes. We expect everyone to be with us on the first day. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Superintendent Prayer. We're now going to bring in Principal Rennie Fong, who is the principal of PS 130 Hernando de Soto on the Lower East Side in Chinatown. Principal Fong, I know you're working with your staff and families to prepare for blended learning. Can you share with us how you're approaching reopening in your school?
Yeah, what we've learned is communication is key. And good evening, everyone, Deputy Chancellor and Chancellor. It's definitely been a 24/7 operation for so many of us, and we couldn't do this work without countless online team meetings with our superintendents, executive superintendents, our central teams, my fellow principals. They've been a godsend, a really strong support network, and our assistant principals and our teachers and support staff. Even they have come in over the summer break, and the key is just really making sure we're on the same page and helping each other out and really communicating. We're also really grateful for our families for attending our online town hall meetings. They've been really successful because I think parents want to know a lot of things. So they've been asking us the tough questions and collaborating with us and coming up with very creative ideas and solutions because as the Chancellor said many times, there's no simple solutions during this time, so we really need everyone to come together, and the teamwork is really important. So our custodial staff, Division of School Facilities, they've been on it 24/7. And so we're working with them also and working together in planning how to make the school safe. And kitchen staff, they've been there every day feeding in our school over 15,000 meals a day. So really thanking them for their heroism, during this time and feeding everyone. It's just been a lot of tossing and turning in the middle of the night for a lot of us. And so, you wake up and you jot down ideas and questions or say, oh, I got to ask my staff about this or talk to my family. So it's a lot, but we do everything because of the children. So we remain focused always on the children and our families and how we can do better.
Thank you for that, Principal Fong. I see we have our head of school food with us, Krista Carrico. Good evening. We've referenced school food. We've given what it looks like on the local side. Can you just maybe bring us in and give us an overview of what parents can expect with school food in the fall?
Definitely, Adrian. Thank you for having me. Chancellor and others, welcome. Glad to see everyone. We are once again looking forward to feeding all children. Every single child attending school will be getting meals, breakfast and lunch, of course, and children who are not in session will also have meals available at every school. Starting on the first day of school, we will go back to the regular National School and Breakfast Lunch Program, and every single child will have the availability to receive meals. With that said, we're proud to continue to be serving meals throughout the rest of the summer. We've reached the 50 million mark since we started serving meals during the pandemic, which is amazing. And again, some credit to Principal Fong for the staff at his school. We're reaching 14,000 meals a day often there, and it's a credit to everyone involved in that. So once again, we're proud to continue to do this work, and we look forward to the first day of school.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. So Principal Fong, we're gonna ask you some questions, and I just wanna preface this with, every school looks different. We have close to 1,800 schools in our system. None of them look exactly the same. But what we wanted to do was to make sure that families have an understanding of what it's going to look like at certain schools. And we wanted to give some granular, like a visual, a picture, if you will, for families to say, okay, you know, now I can start to imagine what it might look like in my school. So thank you, Principal Fong, for being here. I'm going to ask you a question. Our first question for you is from a parent, Karma Saksus from PS 133 in District 26. And she wanted to know, will the school start and be on the same time and the same on every day? Or will it be changing, different start times on different days?
Great question. And as you said, and the chancellor said, we're going to be staggering schedules. And so, you know, to maintain the social distancing. So again, it's going to look different at different schools. In some schools, we're choosing different models. So every day, though, should be about the same in terms of the amount of time. As the chancellor mentioned, we're giving more time for the teachers to plan in the morning and also to connect with families in the afternoon and also to have their preparation time. So for the students, usually it's about a 6-hour day. It's going to be decreased to about 5.5 hours. So children will be coming in about 8:30, a little later again for, you know, our youngest students to give them more time to sleep and also, you know, so they can come in and feeling safe and not with a big rush in the crowd. But, and also dismissal will, you know, it used to be like 2:30 or 3, it might be 2 o'clock. Again, to give teachers the time to connect with families every day and also to have more preparation time. So for most schools, it'll be around from 8:30 to 2, but it will vary.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to turn to our chancellor. Another question from the same parent. Will there be 6 hours of school like usual?
So it's going to look a little different in different places. Obviously, if you're remote learning, no one would say you want your children for 6 hours to be in front of a computer screen. That's just not healthy. So there will be a mix of different kinds of assignments. I think that if there is anything that is good about, there is a lot of things, but if there's one thing that I would point out about remote learning is that it does give flexibility for students and families to plan around when their instruction will take place. And I've heard from families that have said, listen, you know, it was a tough road to hoe. We had a lot of things to learn, but we were able to spend time together, and it wasn't just between the hours of 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. So to answer the question, the day will be for our employees, for our teachers, for principals work way more than 6 hours. Like multiply that by 4. Principal Fong here is a good example. I mean, I don't think we had to pry him out of his school because he wanted to be there. But so that's the kind of dedication we have with our colleagues. But there will be a full workday for our teachers, our principals, because they will be doing the planning, they will be doing the behind the scenes coordination. There'll be a lot of moving parts. But for our students, there will be the equivalent of six hours of schoolwork, but they'll be able to spread it around. Obviously in person, because of the staggered schedules, if you were to actually take a clipboard and say how many minutes of instruction, you know, it might not be 6 hours, but it will be quality time in a school building with teachers and adults that care for the children.
Thank you very much for that. I know there's a lot of parents who are thinking about drop-off, pickup, how that's going to work, especially with the young children. This question is along those lines. It's from Fine Low from PS 235 in District 18. And Principal Fine, I'm going to ask you this question. To the best of your ability, how are you thinking about this? What methods and procedures are going to be taken to make sure my 5-year-old is safe when I drop him off to school? Being that parents can't go into the school, are we just to drop the kids off on the sidewalk? Is there social distancing and safety? How's it going to work?
A great question. And yeah, as the chancellor said, we really encourage our parents to partner together with our teachers and our staff so that the families and our teachers, that the relationship is so critical in helping our children. So in terms of schools opening, and it's only about, a month. I can't believe how fast August is going. I have some homework, I guess, for our families in that, especially our young children, I often use this, the mood meter that we use a lot in our schools, whereas, red is very angry or, nervous, blue, really sad, yellow, happy like the sun, and green, very calm. When we're in the red and blue, it's really hard to make good decisions, and when our kids are in the red and blue, especially I think of our young ones, if they're crying and screaming, we got to find ways to get them to the yellow and the green. So finding ways to do that, we got to start doing homework now. So one of the things, I thought about is just wearing masks. Because at home, they might not be used to the parent wearing the mask or the child wearing a mask. So, start doing that now so the children get comfortable with wearing masks, because it's not just for a few minutes, it's going to be for a long period of time. And then for them to get used to seeing you, the parent, talking through a mask, so that say, oh, the teachers are going to be wearing masks. And yeah, one of our parents had a great idea of doing videos beforehand so they could actually see how the teacher looks like without a mask, and then with the mask. So these came from the parents, like these great ideas. Another thing we've been talking about is social distancing. So I have a tape measure here. So six feet is really, really long, guys. So 6 feet, you got to show your students like what 6 feet means to be away from your teacher, and explaining how sometimes they can't come close and hug you, even though they really, really want to. But, play a social distancing game. Like, okay, let's social distance now. So what is 6 feet and what does that look like? These learning opportunities before school starts, because again, our biggest goal is to alleviate that, the anxiety, mitigate, the fear. And so giving them and talking with them, seeing how they're feeling about school, and not waiting for, okay, I'm going to drop you off on this day and that's it. See you later, right? We can never do that to our little ones. And I think with extreme exceptions, I believe the pre-K, like this parent was a pre-K parent, if there are certain circumstances where the child really needs to come, where it needs the parent, then we can work with the family, in terms of making sure the parent, if they would be wearing a mask. But there are times where, the youngest, our babies, that they might need that extra hand holding. So we understand that.
Thank you so much, Principal Fong, for that answer. So we're gonna move to the Bronx. We have with us our superintendent from Community School District 7, Rafael Alvarez. Superintendent Alvarez, can you tell us all, how are you and your school district preparing for fall reopening?
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us. Good evening, parents and all of New York City. We took a four-prong approach to this by looking at accelerating learning and instruction. We looked at project-based learning. We initially saw that interactions declined each month since the beginning of remote learning district-wide, and we needed to do something. So we realized that we needed to rethink, redesign our curriculum in our remote environment to engage more students physically and academically. Project-based learning kind of allowed us to provide instruction that connected academics to real-world concepts, thus leading to increased interactions and intellectual engagement. Then we moved into community partnerships. We knew that we had to figure out how do we continuously communicate with the community and all stakeholders. So we currently are holding bi-monthly meetings during this pandemic with our CEC, which allowed us to problem solve with developing stronger family and community ties together. See, our focus remotely was to support the whole child, and we were and are committed to ensuring, albeit in a different environment, high quality education doesn't stop. We used our GEMs intentionally, focusing on engaging our young women to provide intellectual and physical remote learning experiences as voices of our students. For example, our external partnerships with American Express and Google, Junior Achievement and Food Magazine, helping to further develop our student leaders and social emotional needs while developing strong partnerships with our community. We also sought out opportunities to provide basic necessities such as food and connecting with our families with resources during crisis. In terms of developing our people, we needed to take another approach as to how we support our teachers. So we created our remote learning stars. As a result, we developed the capacity of teacher leaders throughout the entire district, 2 from every single school, to provide ongoing training throughout the summer on different digital pedagogical approaches to work with teachers and engaging their students more during instruction. As we heard from parents, the constant giving assignments wasn't enough for several students. Participation has been at maximum capacity, and due to the overwhelming demand, we're pleased to actually extend that to the fall 2020 and in partnership with our BCO, be able to give CTLE credits to our teachers. In terms of advancing equity now, we have ensured and committed that in District 7, one of the most vulnerable districts in our city, has access to remote learning devices across all of our schools by sharing across our schools any technology we had. All students are receiving in accordance with their mandates. And we created something a little different where we provided technical support for students and families. We partnered with DIIT to create 5 tech supports at every single school. They went through training in the summer with DIIT along with the district to come up with a tech guide as well as tech support, because we recognized that it was very difficult for our parents to reach out to the phone number that was provided for the entire city. So we created our own hub of sustainability and building capacity, and each one of our schools has a tech team so that we could reduce the amount of cases that go to the central level and get immediate answers for our families, particularly when it comes to language barriers. And lastly, we continue to have our community conversations regarding race, racism, and injustice with school communities and leaders across our district. Throughout the summer, we had several series. During the remote learning time, we had series, and we have another set of series that are supposed to happen throughout the school year.
Thank you so much for that. This is along the line of the what you've just talked about, tech. And I'm actually going to ask the Chancellor this question first, and then we will pivot to you for how you're thinking about it locally. The question is around iPads and electronic devices and whether or not they have to be returned or if families and students can continue to use them. That question was given to us anonymously from a parent at MS 890 in District 22. And then that parent also wanted to know if a student selects remote learning, is the staff going to be from the school or is there going to be a new special remote teacher from somewhere else?
Yeah, great questions. And I want to thank Superintendent Alvarez as well. I mean, I'm so honored to be in the presence of my colleagues because you can tell all of the work, Superintendent Pryor, Superintendent Alvarez, they talked Chris Tricarico. I mean, there's a lot of work that's happening that doesn't often get seen. And it's just really, for me, a proud moment to see our leaders talking about the work that they're leading. Not to mention our Principal Fong. He's a superstar out there. So to the tech question, the devices that have been assigned to our students are assigned to the student. So they can continue to use that device as long as they are still part of our school system. So obviously when the seniors graduated, there's a process that we're initiating now to retrieve those devices because other students have to use those devices. As much as I would love to be able to say, just keep it, I can't give away government property, so I'm sorry, we have to recollect those devices if you've graduated from the system so that we can redeploy them to other students as well. But as long as you are a system, a student within our system, you can continue to use that device. Now, what I'm going to ask is, again, we are a big community. So if a school has a device that they will assign to you as a student, and you no longer need the other device that was assigned to you from us, then we're going to ask that you return it because there's somebody somewhere that's probably going to need to use that device as well. So that's kind of where we are with devices. And we'll be contacting folks about those devices that folks that have, students that have graduated as well. The other part of that question was what, Adrian?
Just about teaching. Is the remote teacher going to be from the school or from somewhere else?
We are doing everything we can to keep the teaching for remote students be a teacher from that same school. But I referenced earlier in my remarks that we have 85% of our teachers that will be in blended learning mode based on the accommodations that have been requested. That means 15% of our teachers have requested accommodations. And it may sound like, well, it's just 15%. So that means that there are 11,300 teachers that have requested accommodations that cannot be in the blended learning environment. So what that means is that our intent is that teachers from the same school will provide the remote learning to the students from that school. I can't guarantee it because staffing is a real challenge, especially when you've got 11,300 teachers that have already said, I need an accommodation. And you know, if you think about, let me give you this example. If you think of a classroom in an elementary school with 25 students, And because of social distancing requirements and the medical guidance that we put out, you can only have 12 students in that classroom. So then what happens to the other 13 students? They have to go to another classroom, and then that means that they have another teacher. So schools are going to be very stretched in terms of staffing, and anybody that can do math already knows that. So I want to just be very clear that our intent is that teachers from the same school will provide the remote learning experiences for the students from that same school, but I can't guarantee it because staffing being what it is, it's going to be a real challenge for us. But we're gonna, that's what we want. That's our North Star. That's what we're really working towards. But I hope you understand that I can't guarantee it.
Thank you for that answer, Chancellor. I'm going to sort of combine these questions for you, Superintendent Alvarez. One is just how are you thinking about the distribution of electronic devices in your district? And then we have another question from a parent on technology. You're the right person to answer this. It's from Elaine Wilson in District 5 at PS 46. And she wants to know, can parents have an orientation so that they can learn how to operate the iPad? So if you could talk a little bit about the educational component that you're providing for your families on tech.
Yeah, so what we've done is over the summer, we've realized not only do we have to have these tech supports at each individual school, we also realized that a lot of the complaints or concerns usually get filtered to the parent coordinators. Well, to no fault of their own, many of them don't have the instructional aspects that are necessary to be able to support parents with these particular questions. And so what we decided to do under the leadership of my family leadership coordinator, Timothy Coleman, we decided to use the parent coordinators and provide them training sessions on actually using the platforms that the DOE has also provided, but also asking them to participate in the teacher trainings that were being provided over the summer to build their digital pedagogy, thus being able to provide professional development to their own family and their own communities on using the iPad resources. In addition to that, we've created a tech guide in partnership with DIIT that would give visuals for parents to be able to maneuver how to use the actual iPads or to log on. For example, about 2 weeks ago on the 31st, parents may have been logged out of the iPads. They had to actually do a process. Well, with the instructions that we were able to provide, parents could visually be able to use that, especially if they had a language barrier because it had the visuals. We've been using the tech guides to be able to provide support throughout the school year, and they've been getting ongoing support and training through our DIIT office, which is working in partnership with District 7.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Alvarez. I see we have our Deputy Chancellor, Karen Goldmark, here with us tonight. Karen, I want to bring you into this conversation. And we actually had a question from a parent in District 32 around charter schools. And the questions here are, and they're very specific. My twins are in 2 different schools. One is in public school, the other is in a charter school. Do the charter schools have to follow our New York City public schools rules and regulations?
Thank you for that question, Deputy Chancellor Austin, and thank you, Chancellor, for hosting all of us this evening and for your words of encouragement. So the question of whether charter schools have to follow New York City DOE rules and regulations is a good one, and the answer is a tiny bit complicated. So I'm going to back up one step and then answer. So district public schools are run by the Department of Education. They receive all of the supports that the Department of Education has available to it, and those schools are answerable directly to Chancellor Carranza through the superintendents who you've heard from tonight. Charter schools are granted permission to operate directly by the state, and they have to follow all of the state rules and laws that district public schools do. In addition to that, any charter school that is in DOE space must follow the health and safety guidance that we have provided for every school in New York City that's in a DOE space. That does not mean, though, that charter schools have to follow our exact schedules that we are providing to district schools, and they will not receive the same supports that we're providing in terms of the academic and instructional supports because they have their own academic programs. So the answer to whether a school has to follow the same rules and regulations, that depends on which rule and which regulation. For health and safety, absolutely yes. For academic programming, no. For things that are in between, maybe.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chancellor Goldmark, for that nuanced answer. It's never simple, it's never easy with the DOE, but thank you for bringing us into the complexity there. While I have you, I just want to ask a question around outdoor policy. We're getting those questions left and right, and want to make sure we get you to answer that question on what can parents expect for outdoor?
Yes. Thank you. So this is something that actually has been brought to us by parents. So we actually want to thank the parents who have been raising this question as what can we do to provide outdoor learning experiences for two reasons, really. One is that there is emerging science that transmission of the virus is less likely in an outdoor setting. And the other is, of course, that being outside is healthy in and of itself. And that this is a way to actually have more space. So we are developing a policy. We're working with parents, educators, and our experts on physical space and health to develop a policy that will allow schools to step forward and say that they are interested in pursuing this avenue. So you can look for that coming in the days and weeks ahead. We are still developing it, and some parents have actually heard from us already as we've been testing out what we're looking at. Broadly speaking, we are looking forward to this. It is not something that we expect we are going to require each and every school in New York City to move forward with, as there are a lot of logistical challenges, including, as you may have noticed, what happens when it rains. So, so some of the questions that we need to answer are going to require school level answers. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Deputy Chancellor Goldmark. We're now going to bring our superintendent from District 15, Anita Skop, into this conversation. Superintendent Skop, we want to know from you, and we got a lot of questions around the social emotional work that's happening in our district, and a question that one of our parents, Luce Clark, has. She's from District 5. She wanted to know, is the DOE considering children's social emotional needs for growth? So if you can talk a little bit about what you're doing. I know you're doing a lot of work in that area. How you're approaching it in District 15.
So first of all, thank you for having me this evening. I'm so honored to be here. This is so near and dear to my heart, and so much what we think about in District 15. So first and foremost, let me start with the understanding that we are very cognizant of the fact that all of our children, all of our teachers, all of our families right now are families and children and adults who are people of trauma. We are all living through a trauma. In a very short span of time, our world changed, and it is incredibly complex and incredibly different. And sometimes it feels like we woke up in an alternate universe. And we want to be very respectful of the needs of children. So what we've been doing in District 15, and this has been going on for a long time, is we have been having, of course, the obvious. We have advisory, we have responsive classrooms, we have all of these protocols that enable students to come together in their classroom and develop a community so that when they come together and talk, they are comfortable, they have a sense of belonging, and that is a priority. We are very much about the whole child. Every school in our entire district has been receiving ruler training and has received ruler training. And I was smiling when Principal Fong held up the mood meter, because you see them all over District 15 as well. But more importantly, dealing with the trauma, our principals were trained by the Department of Ed in the most incredible trauma-aligned training over the summer, and that training is going to be available and part of the training that teachers are getting as they come back to the school, so that they will be cognizant of understanding, how do we deal with children? What does it mean when they act out? What does it mean when they have needs? We talked about our littlest ones. It's not enough just to say, put on a mask and practice. That's fine, but they're going to be in a completely different setting. So we need to think about, how do we create an environment that's comfortable, and how do we acknowledge that when a child is upset, they may not follow the rules, and we have to deal with them in a kind and compassionate and loving way. So that's part of it. The other thing is thinking about all of us as human beings, and how do we as adults interact with each other. Our teachers, our principals, everybody on this panel is under incredible stress. And we have done some things in District 15 to help that. For example, we have yoga. We have online remote yoga classes. We have even yoga for little ones. One of the ladies in my office is certified. Our BCO has a yoga program. So we have the ability for families to get online in the morning and do 20 minutes or half an hour of yoga, or a little one to go online and do 5 minutes of yoga with Medi-Teddy, which is a whole other thing. And we have the opportunity. One of the things we focused on the most is about openness and accessibility. So when we were talking about anxiety, we were concerned that parents who felt that they could not support their children with their learning in the spring because it was so new to them, or maybe because they don't value themselves as educated enough to help their children, which, by the way, is not true. Every parent is their child's first teacher and brings so much to the table. So do not sell yourself short. But what we did is we created something that has been replicated, and we went back to something that was very old, and we did a program literally from 30 years ago called Dial a Teacher. And we set up volunteer teachers who, in addition to their work, were willing to give a couple of hours a week to be on call if parents needed extra support. And so we did all of those things. We held lots of forums. We held lots of meetings. We made ourselves accessible. My district is a very unique district in the sense that it is a microcosm of the entire city of New York. If you look at it, you will say it has some of the most affluent areas in Brooklyn, which is absolutely true. But it also has Sunset Park, an area that is a large immigrant community, and they are very much in food crisis. It also has Red Hook, a historically disadvantaged area that is just finding its voice due to our diversity initiatives and our work. We have had our teachers trained in implicit bias. We have put forward the belief system and the curriculum that children should see themselves in the work they are doing, and they should learn real history. So we have worked very hard on the whole child, the whole family, and bringing District 15 together as a community.
Thank you so much for that, Superintendent Scott. I have another question that follows on the heels of that. It's from a parent in your district, but from a high school. And so I know you're with community schools, but I'd ask that you speak to the answer to this question. It's, what plans are in place for students attending art programs, for example, dance or music, that need in-person instruction? And how will more demanding courses and testing be arranged?
So first of all, I'm very proud to say that I have the Brooklyn High School for the Arts under my purview, and it is a spectacular arts high school. So I'm very happy to answer that. I actually have 2 high schools, very exciting, and it gives me a very broad perspective. I have been trained by my wonderful principal from Brooklyn High School for the Arts to understand that there are, and by the way, the chancellor has said the same thing, there are arts programs that are going to work spectacularly in person. Some dance programs, the art programs. These are programs that are safe, using social distancing and using specific precautions. They can also be done remotely and still produce beautiful work. And we have proof of that because we had schools that put on shows, that put on art shows, that won competitions, even with remote learning on the fly in the spring. But there are some programs that will not work well unless they are remote. And one of those is something like band. And the chancellor has stated, and as my principal taught me, if you have kids who are playing musical instruments that involve horns or something that you literally are blowing into, you cannot, even with social distancing, it's not safe. You cannot do it with a mask. You can't, there's a degree of vapor that's exuded. And so those are the things that will be conducted remotely. And the thing about remote learning that I do want to say is one of the really good things about remote learning is that you can give one-to-one instruction and support in small sound bites. You literally are coaching kids. And so these kinds of programs, the arts and other programs that I'm going to talk to in a second, this is the perfect opportunity for kids to feel like they're getting individualized tutoring and coaching and support in a public school setting. So this is a wonderful opportunity to make lemonade, so to speak. I want to talk about instruction for just a minute, and even at the deepest level, because again, something that my colleague Rafael alluded to, and that was project-based learning. We tend to envision learning in a very old school model, because for some of us who are old school like me, when I went to school, I'm embarrassed to tell you that I went to school when the desks were screwed to the floor. And this is the time to think about 21st century learning. This is the time for us to say, we can empower students to be amazing learners. We can create project-based learnings that allow them to push the envelope, to take college-level research, to meet with people across the world. We can create that environment, and we can push that environment. There is nothing that can't be done if we create imaginative learning opportunities for our kids and empower them as learners. They should be the people who are presenting. They should be the people who are creating museums, creating papers, creating all kinds of opportunities for them, in fact, to become the teachers. And so for parents who are worried that the work will not be challenging enough, there are wonderful ways to do this, and I have seen amazing work from teachers. Please remember that what you saw in the spring was literally on the fly, and now that they've had the time to work, they are going to knock your socks off. It's going to be really strong because our teachers have learned so much, our kids know so much, and now we can push the envelope forward.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Scott. You guys are a dynamic group. We are at 7:47. Time flies when you're having fun. So we're going to sort of speed through a little bit to hear from all of our voices. We're going to go to our principal from John Dewey High School, Principal Connie Hamilton. Welcome this evening. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that came from parents who had questions about high schools. Here's a series of questions from Jackie Bernard from Beacon High School, who wanted to know, are high schoolers going to be traveling in the corridors and changing classrooms? Are they going to be using their lockers, which are close to each other? And what provisions are being planned to travel on subways? And so I know you've thought about this, you're thinking about it with your school. If you could talk about how you're approaching these types of questions and thinking.
Thanks for having me, everyone. I appreciate it. I think that my voice tonight is speaking for large, comprehensive high schools in this new world that we live in. And I know that for John Dewey High School, we house 2,350 students with 190 staff members. We get students from all walks of life with many different needs. And so when we talk about students moving safely in the classroom and or out of the classroom in corridors and hallways, I know we had a meeting with parents. We had 135 parents show up to our virtual meeting just recently, and that was the question. And so I think it's important for everyone to understand that in every school where students can be cohorted and sit in a classroom and not move around, that seems like it would be the safest way to run school. But in a large comprehensive high school, where we are fortunate enough to have students come in and be programmed individually based on their needs, it's hard to cohort students and have them sit in one classroom. So for that reason, I mean, the good reason that we get to give them everything that they need and that we meet them as they come into the school, we cannot do it that way. So we were very lucky that our chancellor thought about different models for us to choose. And in a case where there's 2,350 students, we are going with a third model, where instead of 2,000 students, we're bringing in 400 students a day. And so because we're making it such a low number, we then are able to do monitoring in our hallways so that we can ensure that we have one-way hallways and staircases that are going only up or only down, and we have people posted, personnel that are helping us in this movement. So lots of signs posted, lots of ways that our student government will take on civil leadership duties and work with us to help us ensure that students are buying into this. We've already had town halls and forums and student government and SLTs and consultation, and everybody is on board with this model for this way of moving around. To add to that, we are a scanning school. So when students come in the morning, 2,300 at a time, and you see all of these students together on a line, you have to look at it in a very different way. So we will have social distancing as students move into the school, as well as still have scanning and do our temperature checks. So we really had to bring parents in and students in on what this would look like, because it's just a game changer at this point. As far as lockers go, our lockers are attached to our gyms, and they are about this close to each other. So the answer for us at John Dewey High School is that we will not be using the lockers, and we are trying to figure out a way where PE can be handled in more of a remote situation, because we have a huge mindfulness program. So our remote PE will probably look like mindfulness, yoga, meditation, and all the things that we can do in a remote way so that we're not harming students in lockers where they want to change and where they have to be in a gym that maybe is not ventilated in the way that it should be. The third question regarding subways, we do have a subway station right across the street from John Dewey. And because we are a scanning site and because it's all hands on deck in the school in the morning, there's not too many ways, and also for labor relations issues, that we are standing around the subway and ensuring that things are, working the way that it should. Although in the afternoon, we do make it a habit to be out there and making sure that students are doing what they need to do in general. So now it'll look a little different as we think about who we can actually assign in the outside past the campus, which is not our property.
Thank you so much, Principal Hamilton. I know you're giving great thought to this. Thank you for answering these questions. I have one more question for you. It is from a parent who has a child at Iris Shimini Art and Design High School in District 2. And that parent wanted to know, please clarify and reassure families that remote learning does not remove the student from their own school community. And so if you could just speak to how you are thinking about programming your students who are remote only.
So in my best hope, all of my teachers would be teaching all of my students, and we will have a relationship between all remote teachers and all teachers who are in the building. We do have the time where they can work together. We do have office hours. We do have other ideas around how our teachers could work together and work with the same children and different children. So for us at John Dewey, if it turns out that the right licensed teachers are home doing remote, and we have the right amount of people in the building where we can ensure that everybody could work together, then my answer would be, if I can have all of my teachers attached to my own students, which I know most principals are hoping that that's the case, it would be a little bit easier for us to keep the relationships going from our students to our staff, which is really the most important thing right now, because we're talking about SEL and we're talking about social emotional learning. And if our kids are not attached to us after all of this, it will be very difficult for our kids to get reacclimated to a new school year. So in the hopes that we don't have too many teachers staying home and that we do have the bodies to fill the classrooms, we do have many ideas on how we can align all of the remote kids with our kids in the building.
Thank you very much for that. We are going to now bring in our superintendent from Queens, Tammy Pate, superintendent of District 28. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Pate. If you can just share with us, how are you approaching reopening in District 28?
So I want to speak just briefly about how we are supporting principals and getting the lift. So I think about together is better. If I'm honest, I'll think about High School Musical when they sing "We're all in this together." And so what we have tried to do and have done is receive sort of our marching orders. Chancellor Carranza, I'll return to the orchestra analogy I shared back in January. As we have received guidance from our conductor via the Department of Education guidance, as well as Department of Health, as well as CDC, I pulled my principals together and created what we've called critical consideration. And that's a fancy term for things that we need to be mindful of as we engage working the problem. And if we can be honest, none of us have actually ever done this before. But what we are really good at is problem solving as educators. And so the critical considerations, after we reviewed all of those documents together, ended up being grouped into teaching and learning, including priority standards by grade and grade band, health and safety, including social emotional learning and trauma supports, and communication protocols. We worked in cohorts within the district with 36 principals, and then corporally as a larger superintendency group in order to answer the questions of how we address those critical considerations. And what that has ultimately done is create a document that is universal for District 28. So no matter what school you go to, we have a very similar process for how we are addressing entering and exiting buildings, feeding, moving around the building. Now the exits, the stairwells, and the people who are responsible for each of those items will change. Fundamentally, it's the same language, which makes it easier for us to post it to our websites and to share it with our larger community. I should also add that I have been having these types of conversations 2 to 3 evenings a week, and we have them with our CECs, our President's Council, our local representatives, our political representatives, and also at our school-based town halls. And so that is just one of the things that we are doing to prepare our schools for reopening. But I thought that that was the best place to start, because I think that if we can figure out how we're going to work together as a district, then it safeguards us from having folk who are kind of lost and don't have proper direction. It also supports our families and being empowered. So no matter where you go in District 28, there you are, because we have critical considerations that support you in knowing what to expect as you return to school.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pate. I think we have time for one last question before we wrap up tonight. Here's a question from Millie Johnson at PS 290 in District 24. She wants to know, can I opt out my child from school to remote learning throughout the school year?
Yes, so I know that question was presented earlier, and there is a process and will be a process for families to opt in and to opt out of remote or blended learning. That will have a regular interval. Obviously, it cannot happen on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. It will have an interval where you will have an opportunity to change your option. And let me tell you this, returning back to a musical analogy, if you remember The Wiz, when they came out of the suits and Can't You Feel a Brand New Day, that is what I anticipate for the spring, when we're all preparing to opt back into in-person and can live in a space where it feels more normal to us. So to answer the question, absolutely, there will be intervals through which you can opt in and opt out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pate. Thank you, everyone. And it's great to be ending on a note of optimism. Looking forward to the spring. With that, I am going to turn it back over to our Chancellor to close us out.
So thank you, Deputy Chancellor Austin. I want to thank all of my colleagues, our incredible superintendents, our executive superintendents that are on the call, our principals. You were incredible. And you can tell the level of detail that all of us are trying to get to really, really be thoughtful and very deliberate about what will it look like when we launch in September. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Deputy Chancellor Goldmark, you as well, our Chief Officer for Facilities, John Shea. Thank you, Chris Tricarico, everybody. But more importantly, thanks to all of our families and our students and everybody that's on this call. This is part of a series. We will continue to stand up these forums to answer your questions. And as I say at the conclusion of every one of these sessions when we're together in community, please continue to take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Until the next time, thank you.